Good morning, I'm Susan Pertnoy, and welcome to Mosaic, Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County's weekly news magazine show. Now in our 40th season, Mosaic explores Jewish issues here in the Palm Beaches and around the world. 40 years ago, this public affairs show started shining a light on the remarkable people who make up the Jewish community of the Palm Beaches. Along the way, host Barbara Kay expanded the show, and we began interviewing the movers and shakers in the world of the arts, politics, and religion. Today, we're taking a look at how those hundreds of interviews brought our community a deeper understanding of issues that affect our lives. We'll be right back with Mosaic after this brief commercial break.
If it wasn't for the financial assistance, I couldn't come here.
Every little bit helps. She says, I get stronger every day.
When you have a child and you want the absolute best for them, it's twice as important to make the community strong.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I could have bought my BMW anywhere, but at Freeman, I love my salesman, my BMW, and Club Freeman.
It's the Season of Love sales event. Enjoy exceptional offers at Braman BMW, West Palm Beach and Jupiter. BramanBMW.com.
The Live-In Palace at Morse Life is leasing luxury residences for ages 65 plus. Offering more than first-class amenities and white glove service, life at the Palace is like life aboard a luxury cruise ship with more things to enjoy life now. More fabulous food, more fun, more friends, more family, more freedom, more future. Morse Life is more life. Live it at the Palace. Start your fabulous future now. Call 561-537-3402.
Good morning. Today we have a very special episode. It's our 40th anniversary of Mosaic. We're interviewing Barbara Kay, the long-term host of the show, and for those who don't know, my mother. Welcome to Mosaic, Mom.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's such a thrill to have you join us today. You've spent a lot of your years researching guests for interviews, and I absolutely understand what that's like, because now that I'm doing it, it takes a lot of research. That being said, once the camera turns on, sometimes I freeze. You make it seem effortless. You speak to people like they're your best friends in your living room. How do you do that, Mom?
Not with great difficulty. I have to say, it's easy, you know. I've been doing this for so many years that it's part of my life, and I'm accustomed to it. So I don't find it a difficult situation.
You've had a lot of interviews with very well-respected journalists, and you've asked some very poignant questions. Let's go to some clips and watch them.
Okay. What we're looking for is credible news. We want information that we can rely on and trust.
And let's face it, people are more and more suspicious of what they see on television, what they read in the newspapers. The latest Pew study found that people are relying more on late-night comedians for their political news.
Great.
And on the internet than on, or at least there is an increase in the number of people relying on late-night comedy for political news, especially among younger viewers.
What do you think is, in general, the responsibility of a journalist?
Well, it's unfashionable to say so these days, but I think it is to tell the American public what it needs to know. And I'm afraid that what's happened to journalism over the last 10, 15 years or so, particularly television journalism, is that it's deteriorated into a business where we tell the public what it wants to know. So that if you want to hear a conservative right-wing point of view, you tune in Fox. If you want to hear a liberal left-wing point of view, you tune in MSNBC. And in between, you have the CNNs of this world who are trying to give something that they think will appeal to the widest possible audience. Well, frankly, I think appealing to an audience is the last thing we ought to be doing. We ought to be telling them, here's why you need to worry.
So much of the media is so negative in regard to Israel today. I don't know, it's very disturbing to me. Doesn't it bother you?
It bothers me a lot, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course I'm part of that, because for decades we only report on Israel when there's a moment of conflict. You know, I always say about journalism, we're the exclamation marks, we're the punctuation of a book. You know, we just report, you only hear about Israel on the news when there's an exclamation mark, when there's a question mark, when there's some dramatic moment. And those dramatic moments, because it's a place of conflict, are normally to do with conflict, wars, bombs, etc. So all people know about Israel, or mostly, is the conflict. And and that's partly my fault, because I'm a mainstream media kind of guy, and that's what we do. That's why I wrote the book. We do many other kinds of stories too. Features about about high tech and agriculture, all kinds of movies.
Right.
But they get lost in the general noise of the conflict.
Coming up, we'll continue our look back at 40 years of Mosaic, and we'll see rare show clips that show an evolving Jewish Palm Beach.
Eat, drink, and enjoy Shabbat services at Temple Bethel's Friday night happenings. Cocktail reception and kosher dinner at 5:30, followed by our creative, musically driven Shabbat service. Traditional to progressive, the food and music change every Friday, and you'll want to stay for complimentary dessert.
Plan to spend the whole evening here, and you'll walk away and you'll say, wow, we're coming back next week. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat services at Temple Bethel, open to everyone. Join us every Friday night.
If it wasn't for the financial assistance, I couldn't come here.
Every little bit helps. She says, I get stronger every day.
When you have a child and you want the absolute best for them, it's twice as important to make the community strong.
Mom, you've interviewed many authors, Elie Wiesel, Rabbi Telushkin, Daniel Silva, so many different genres. Tell us, did you really read those books for research?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I really did, honestly. I read them carefully and with a great deal of passion, and I thought they were wonderful.
Well, it's amazing. Even in your interviews, you could recall a certain page and ask a question. You're remarkable in that regard.
You're so sweet.
Tell us a little bit about Elie Wiesel.
Well, he had a gentle nature, and I liked him very much. I thought he had a passion in regard to the term of what he was doing. It was wonderful, actually.
Why don't we watch some clips?
You know, I'm going to open with a quote that you said, I can't remember how long ago, but I believe that a person who is indifferent to the suffering of others is complicit in the crime, and that I cannot allow, at least for myself. This sense of concern about indifference to evil, indifference to suffering, is that the epicenter really of your life?
It has become the most important element in my work. In my fourth book in the novel called The Town Beyond the Wall, I described the bystander. At that time I divided categories in three: the perpetrator, the victim, and the bystander, the spectator, as I called him. And I described the spectator who is there simply to see, never to move, never to be moved, just to see. And I felt that he or she represents the context of evil, if not evil itself. Evil is possible because of the bystander.
Yeah, you know, you said something that was quite beautiful. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference.
Yes, but I continue. The opposite of ignorance is of education is not ignorance, but indifference. The opposite of beauty is not ugliness, but indifference to ugliness and beauty. And the opposite of life really is not death, but indifference to life.
One of the questions you pose is, do you have to believe in God to be a good Jew? Or to be a good person? Or can't you just be a good person?
Right. You see, if you'll be a good person, you're a good person. It's not the same, though, as being a good Jew. Because if we just said that being a good person is the same as being a good Jew, so what am I supposed to say to a Christian who's a good person? You're really a good Jew? It becomes almost a patronizing thing to say. What Judaism does say is that you should practice its laws, even if you might be going through periods when you have doubt. See, Christianity rises and falls on the issue of faith. The name of the religion is Christ, Christian. And if you really have doubts about Jesus' divinity, you can't in any way say you're a Christian. Judaism stands on three pillars of God, law, or Torah, and peoplehood. Ideally, a Jew is involved with all three, but even if you're alienated from one or two, you have ways of continuing to be involved in Jewish life. So a Jew might be going through a period of estrangement, alienation from God, but he can still be part of the community.
Welcome back to Mosaic. I'm sitting here with the author Daniel Silva, and prior to the break, we were talking about his main character in it was a trilogy, and it became 4 books, or 5 books.
Well, there was an internal trilogy to the series, or a cycle of 3 novels that
Gabriel Alon. Okay.
That dealt with, I introduced him in a book called The Kill Artist, which was an Israeli-Palestinian story. And he was meant to be a one-off character, as we like to say, a character that would appear in one novel and go away. And we had our first meeting, my publishers and editors, and they said, "What are you working on?" And I said, "Nothing right now. What are you interested in?" And they said, "We want Gabriel." And I said something like, "You're crazy. It'll never work. No one wants to read about an Israeli agent in a continuing series." And I listed off all these reasons why this series would never work. And they said, "No, you're wrong. Just write it."
Well, you obviously have an unusual marriage anyway, because the book is a sharing. In other words, you're in it, then Koki speaks, and then you speak, and it's the most interesting way of laying out a book I've ever read.
Well, we struggled with how to do this because we write together all the time. We write weekly newspaper columns. We've written many magazine articles together, and when we do that, we generally write in one voice.
This is 2 voices.
But you can't write about your marriage in one voice. You see things very differently, and then we started trying to write it where I told something and he told something, and it got way too repetitive and confusing, and so we realized that the only way to really tell the story was to talk it, and so we talked it out and then wrote it out what we had said.
And then you include other areas. You include immigrant discussion on immigrant marriages, and then even Abigail Adams and John Adams.
We decided to, it wasn't enough just to talk about our own marriage, and so we talked about marriage in American history.
What is the level of Jewish identity, Jewish understanding, Jewish pride that we see in our younger generation today?
It's ironic. We're seeing at the same time an increase in Jewish pride and Jewish identification among a relatively small number of young Jews on college campuses. For example, Hillel membership is strong. Identification with Jewish causes is strong. Where we're seeing a tremendous weakening is in the unaffiliated. It used to be when you and I were in college, even if you weren't identified with Hillel, you felt positively in your Jewishness. Today, a lot of young Jewish people are embarrassed about Israel.
Yes.
They're embarrassed about Soviet Jewry. They're embarrassed about wanting to marry a Jewish spouse. They're embarrassed about being assertively Jewish. So I think we're winning in some quarters, but we're losing in many, many important quarters.
Yeah, but Alan, what can we do about it? It's kind of frightening. What can we do?
I think, first of all, we have to tell young Jewish men and women that being Jewish is something to be very proud of, that we are right, that the cause of Israel is just, that the cause of Ethiopian Jewry is a human rights cause, that the cause we fought for in Soviet Jewry is a wonderful example of private human rights in action. We have to give them something to be proud of. We have to tell them it's fine to identify with the human rights struggle in South Africa, but also identify with your own human rights struggle. We are just as authentic a human rights struggle as any other in the world.
There's no question.
Coming up, More with Barbara Kay as we take a look at what Mosaic has taught us over the past 40 years.
Picture living aboard a luxury cruise ship with first-class service and the best amenities 24/7. Life at Tradition is just like a cruise ship that doesn't leave port, with more fabulous food, more fun with friends and family, a more fulfilling future, more care when you need it, and more freedom when you don't. Our elegant assisted living residences provide so much more, so you can make the most of every day. Rent an apartment at Morse Life and see how much more life can be.
We have over 100 Porsches out of the sun and rain in our 6-story parking garage.
So it's easy to find your dream car at Porsche West Palm Beach.
Porsche West Palm Beach, the #1 Porsche certified pre-owned center with the largest selection in Florida. Visit BraemonPorsche.com.
Mom, you've also interviewed world leaders. I mean, I know when I'm put in that position, it's very nerve-wracking because they're very intimidating. You interview them like they're your best friends. Mm-hmm. How did you really feel when you were doing it?
Actually, I felt very comfortable. I really did. I wasn't uncomfortable at all, and they were very easy with me. And I had no problem with them at all.
Tell us about your interview with Madeleine Albright, because she was, you two had kismet.
I had no problem with her whatsoever. It was easy as could be.
No, it seemed as if the two of you had known each other for years.
No, we had no problem. And I loved having her on the program.
Well, it shows in the clips. We're going to watch them right now.
I want to ask you something. There was an article that came out in the Washington Post, I think it was 1997, February 4th, I think it was, regarding the fact that they discovered that you had a Jewish background. That had to be an awful way to discover a complete transformation in your life.
Well, I begin my book, Prague Winter, with saying I was 59, and I thought I knew who I was, everything about myself, and the country I'd come from. And what happened, just to give you the chronology of this a little bit, when I was at the UN was the first time that I became a public figure. Mm-hmm. And I started getting letters from people who would say they knew my family and none of the facts were right or anything in it. And then in 96, like November 96, I got a letter from someone that had all the names and facts and dates and everything from this person who said, my family knew your family and they were a very fine Jewish family. So it was just when I was being vetted to be Secretary of State. And at the end of the lawyer said, we ask everybody this question, is there anything about yourself that we should have asked that we didn't? And I said, well, you know, it's perfectly possible I'm of Jewish background. And they said, so what? The president's not anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semitic, right.
So then over the holidays, I told my 3 daughters and my son-in-laws, and they were fascinated. They already thought, you know, they loved my parents and the whole Czech background and all that. And then you're not allowed to talk to the press between the time that you've been named and the time you're confirmed. Mm-hmm. And Michael Dobbs from the Washington Post wanted to do a profile of me. So we gave him names of people and things. And then the first week that I was Secretary of State, they came into my office and started handing me these disgusting documents, which were the way Nazis kept track of whom they'd sent to the concentration camp.
You're kidding me.
No, that's how. And I look at these and they have family names, and it's one thing to find out you're Jewish, and it's another to find out that more than 24 of your relatives have died.
Holocaust,
And then there was this other whole issue, which is what you referred to as people who thought I'd lied, that I knew. And I had not lied, I did not know. And so the combination of feelings, I don't know if I can ever describe this properly, of this great joy and pride in having been named Secretary of State, and this horror of finding out about what had happened to my family.
I save things, you know, and in 1999, there was an article in the magazine section of the New York Times, and it was all about you. I have your face here.
Can you give me a copy later on?
I brought this kind of ragged copy for you.
Yeah.
But it says here, in the first 5 months as Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak had made a big bet to focus on a single goal, which he pursued virtually alone: peace. That must have been a terrible disappointment to you.
only to the rest of the world.
You know, I was asked many times, how come I take such risks in order to achieve peace, which, you know, you cannot impose it on the other side. You can impose war. You cannot impose peace. For peace, it takes two. It's like tango. And whenever I was asked about risk, I used to answer that all along my life, I took much higher risk for much lesser causes. And you know, that's a way of life. I thought that there is no meaning of sitting in the chair of Israeli Prime Minister if you are not ready to take, however courageous, so to speak, risky steps in order to change reality. That's the role of leaders. Now, unfortunately, in the case of peacemaking, you can never penetrate the soul and the kind of intentions of the other side, and you cannot impose it upon him. If we had a Palestinian leader with the character of either President Sadat of Egypt or King Hussein of Jordan, we would already have an implemented peace agreement with the Palestinians. Unfortunately, we found a guy who was all along his life and remained to the last day a terrorist, a corrupted leader, and a failure of leadership at any moment of truth. And I thought post-Camp David, you know, I tried my best, but when I found him to be what he was, I saw that it was a time to call a spade a spade. If he looks like a terrorist, he walks like a terrorist, he quacks like a terrorist, probably he's one.
You learn from your parents that the most important thing is to be the best in your profession, in physics, mathematics, chess, ballet, in something. And that maybe will help you. And, to think that you can fight for freedom, for human rights, against dictatorship, there was no such thought, because the only value is how to survive physically. When I did get the strength to fight, when I discovered my identity after 1967, when you see that the world connects the people around you, connect you to Israel, you want to know what it is, you start reading in the underground, and then you discover that you have such a great history. Exodus from Egypt and exodus of Leon Uris today, it's all connected. Suddenly there is one history. And you have great people all over the world. They're scattered, you never met them, but they feel they're your family. And you have the state. And that's when you discover your identity, suddenly you get strength to fight for your rights, for rights of other Jews, and then for the rights of many non-Jews. And that's how it became the spokesman of two movements, Zionist movement and human rights movement.
You really, I tell you, you impassion the world. I remember as a young person walking around with a bracelet, a rubber bracelet with your name imprinted on it, trying to help you get out of that prison and to free the Soviet Jews. That movement was extraordinary. But you really were the epicenter. You and Avital, your wife. You were married, I think, one day, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's really true. First of all, it was a great movement. We Soviet dissidents, Jews who were fighting for our freedom, freedom of others, could never survive in the struggle in one day if it didn't become the struggle of all the Jews of the world.
Over the years, Barbara did some racier interviews, including one with Dr. Ruth Westheimer. Let's look at some of those clips.
All right, so what are your new challenges? Okay, you're on CD-ROM, which means that you're...
Oh, I have something else that's particularly important to me.
What's that?
Brand new. I just finished a taping. It's called Loving for a Lifetime, and it's for single people, and it is use your head to guide your heart. Go out there and find somebody. Don't just sit and complain. Don't just sit and be sad. Go out there. Do something of interest. Go to an activity. That's for Jews and non-Jews. And it has like audio cassettes. It has a video.
Really?
It's going to be an infomercial, and it has a workbook. I hope I'm going to make a lot of shitters. You know why? In the Jewish tradition, it is a very important aspect to make a match. If I can make matches with that new program, I'll be very happy. It's Warner.
Warner?
Yes.
Okay, well, I have a feeling that there are a lot of mitzvot out there for you.
All right.
I really
like
do. I right, you're something else. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you. You write, God gives us marriage to find a soulmate who grasps us fully. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think in life you have a choice. You can be a human being. You can revel and celebrate in your existence, in your passive nature, and in what you are, or you can be a human doing. You can celebrate in your productivity and what you produce. Most people today choose the latter rather than the former, which is a great shame. They want to be known, they want to be celebrated, they want to be acknowledged for the money they earn, their professional achievements, for the people they know, they name drop, for the person they marry. I think so many of us have empowered the outside world to define us. We've put the locus of our own identity, our own self-worth in other people's hands. And therefore, even when they date, they're like peacocks strutting their feathers. They're saying, look how colorful I am, look how charismatic I am. But underneath that, there's a real me that almost no one ever grasps and almost no one ever discovers. And what you end up with is feeling unappreciated and unknown. In Judaism, there is no word for sex. The Bible, the Hebrew language, contains no word for sex. The word is knowledge. The essence of sex is to get naked, not just by taking your clothes off, but by removing your defenses, by removing your inhibitions, by removing your anxieties. It's to allow your innermost self to be manifest. Sex is the only time, the only human activity in which we don't do, we just are. Sex is where we submit entirely to instinct. It's where we put ourselves on autopilot. It's where we put ourselves on manual overdrive. And we just sort of revel in our being rather than in our doing. So a soulmate is someone who sees the real you, the you that exists underneath all the layers.
Mom, here's a little token of our appreciation for allowing us to take a glimpse into your 40 years as host of Mosaic. I have to tell you, it's been a privilege to be a part of this program with you. You were such an inspiration, you're such a professional, and I'm so thrilled that I've had this opportunity to work with the most wonderful woman in the world. I love you, Mother.
I love you too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for our 40th season. We look forward to seeing you next year as we take another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from Mosaic. Mosaic is brought to you by these generous sponsors and underwriters. Learn how you can support Mosaic by visiting jewishpalmbeach.org/mosaic.